Hey everybody, just wanted to do a real quick update here on my native tank. I just got down here and got everybody fed, and while I was feeding this tank I noticed right there you've got the little bit of a dead minnow sticking out, but you can see it's very clearly in the embrace of one of the crayfish. So I don't know if that crayfish caught the minnow and is now sort of waiting to start eating it, or if perhaps that minnow had just died and now the crayfish has just scavenged it. Probably the minnow just died, and the crayfish is just scavenging it. There's my Mayan Cichlid, and he is going around looking for bits of algae wafer. I've talked about this before. This Mayan Cichlid absolutely loves the algae wafers. And I find that really surprising. I always just assumed it was a predatory type fish and it ate other fish. I've never really seen it go after other fish. I've seen it absolutely destroy crayfish. I mean, it eats them almost whole. It just bites chunks out of them and chews them up. But its favorite food seems to be these high-calorie algae wafers. It really, really loves them. Now, I actually looked them up. I looked up the ingredients on the algae wafers to see what was in them. There's the nose sticking out. That little dark spot right there is my Chinese algae eater that's in this tank. And if you can see the rock work now, look how clean it is. He's really, really been in there doing his job and getting this tank cleaned up nicely. And I don't have the forward light on, so everything looks a little bit dim. Here, let me see if I can get that turned on real quick. So that definitely lights the front of the tank up better, and you get a better look at this Mayan Cichlid. It's an absolutely gorgeous fish. I'm really going to hate to get rid of it, but it's just got to go. It's too big. It's never going to let me keep crayfish in the tank since it eats the crayfish, as I was saying. But I find the... got Squeaker over here making a bunch of noise in the background. I find the way it eats the algae wafers very interesting. So I looked up the algae wafers and I looked up the ingredients on them, and it has a lot of spirulina in it. And spirulina is algae, but it's algae that contains a lot of protein. It's up to 70% protein, I believe. And it specifically talked about it being a complete protein. And by complete protein, it meant that it contained the amino acid chains or whatever it was talking about. And again, I'm not really sure what they meant by it, but I can only assume that by being complete proteins, it means that it's a good supplement for like a meat protein rather than other sorts of like vegetable protein. So if the Mayan cichlid is indeed a carnivorous fish, which obviously it is the way it eats crayfish, it still gets the right kind of protein from these algae wafers. I still don't think the algae wafers would be any kind of acceptable substitute for its main staple diet. But it makes sense that it really does like these algae wafers. And for all I know, the Mayan cichlid might be a plant eater in its natural habitat. I don't really know. I always just kind of assumed they were aggressive and predatory. But they really, or this one really, really goes after those algae wafers. I feed it cichlid pellets. I feed it freeze-dried krill. Of course, it eats the crayfish in the tank. And it also eats the flake food I put in the tank. It pretty much eats everything I put in there. But the algae wafers are what it really goes after. What I think it's doing now is actually eating bits of the flake food that have settled to the bottom, because I didn't put that much algae wafers in there. And I guess that crayfish has given up on that fish, or it's finished its meal. So I'm going to have to get in there and get that dead fish out. I've got another one. Actually, that little one right there that you can kind of see being dragged underneath that rock just got grabbed by a crayfish and is being dragged under that rock. So that little dead fish under there is going to become a meal. And I'm going to need to get in here and get this one out. And I've currently got one more that's dead and stuck to the power head. That's fairly common for these little minnows in here to die. You can also see some clean spots on the rocks down here. That's all evidence of where that Chinese algae eater's been eating. You can see the wood and how clear the wood is. So we're coming along. The next step's just going to be getting rid of this Mayan cichlid And once we do that, we'll be able to start really, making the changes to this tank that are going to be more permanent, and you don't want to miss any of that. So make sure you're subscribed. You won't miss any of that. Thanks again for watching this one. Don't forget, this one is my native tank. I'll see you real soon in the next one.